Collaborate and listen, transforming student voice into institutional change. My name is Laura Conroy and I am the Faculty Student Success Officer in the Lifelong Learning Centre, and I am joined by my colleague Lauren Huxley, who is the Student Experience Officer, and we're also joined by some of our wonderful mature students, Faith and Bryony. And we're here today to tell you all about the University of Leeds Mature Student Advisory Board, or as the university loves an acronym, MSAB. And we are delighted to be presenting on a topic that is close to our hearts, co-creation and student voice. So we founded the Mature Student Advisory Board in the autumn of 2021, recruiting 15 undergraduate mature students from across the university to meet formally 4 times a year. But we have also been reactive, setting up additional meetings and subgroups throughout as opportunities arise. We have been overwhelmed by the momentum we have built in our first year, already making important changes to the mature student experience locally and institutionally. We have been approached by staff inquiring about our methods, and we're delighted to be awarded a Leeds University Union Partnership Award for School Community Partnership. This made us stop and reflect, wanting to unpick exactly why this board has caused such a stir, and we went back to our board members to get their thoughts on what they felt has been the root of MSAB's success, and what they felt was important for us to share with you today. As we explore collaboration as an impactful tool for change between staff and students, we're going to reflect on the question, how do we ensure that student voice remains at the core of our decision-making processes and feels meaningful for everyone involved? Before we go any further, we'd like to give credit to our fantastic board members whose brilliant input and ideas have shaped this presentation. It has truly been a collaborative effort, so thank you very much.
As we're going to be talking about student voice and collaboration, the last thing we wanted to do was come here and just tell you everything that Laura and I thought. So, to create this presentation, we ran 2 workshops with our lovely board members, and we started the first one by asking, what does student voice and collaboration mean to you? And we used Mentimeter to collect their answers. Before we show you what they had to say, we'd love it if you could have a think about how you would answer these questions too. So, is this what you expected? Do these answers align with what you were thinking, or is there anything missing? An overarching thing that came through was that staff should be fostering a space where everyone is valued and everyone has an important role to play, whether you're staff, students, or a guest speaker. Some key themes that came through included shared responsibility, co-creation, equality, teamwork, partnership, and relationship building. And we're going to unpick some of these as we move through our presentation today in more detail.
We thought we'd quickly share a bit of background about how the board began. So for those who don't know, the Lifelong Learning Centre offers an institutional service offer to all mature undergraduate students in the same way as other university-wide services such as the Career Centre or Disability Services, as well as being a multidiscipline teaching school in our own right. The board was the idea of 3 staff members in the Lifelong Learning Centre, myself, Lauren and Paul Devlin, our wonderful student support officer. We all had a shared goal to ensure that the mature student experience at the University of Leeds is the best it can be, both in terms of sense of belonging and academic success, and wanted to find a way to ensure mature student voices could be heard and inform local and institutional changes. We had so often heard from mature students who felt that student voice spaces weren't created with mature students in mind, and therefore their voices weren't being heard in these forums. We wanted to build a space where they felt they could share their authentic selves and lived experiences, and do so in a way where we could formally collect that feedback and connect with key stakeholders to enact change. And because our board members could sense we were coming from a place of authenticity, it already felt meaningful. You should only ask for feedback if you're willing to truly listen and make changes, but also have the capacity to make those changes happen.
We thought we'd get a sensitive topic out of the way first, money. Paying our students was something we felt really strongly about from the get-go. Students are so often asked for their time to give their opinions on things, but how do we show them that we really value their input, their time and their energy, their willingness to be vulnerable and to share their experiences with us? Whilst vouchers and prize draws are great, and who doesn't love tea and biscuits, there is nothing that beats paying students. This was something that was really greatly valued by our board members as well, and we actually had 56 applications on our first round of recruitment, which we were overwhelmed by. We've really struggled in the past to recruit for voluntary positions in the centre. Board members fed back to us that being paid was one of the components that really attracted them to the role, and it made them feel like they were being taken seriously and respected, especially during times like now with the cost of living crisis. We must properly credit the time that students are giving to collaborate with us. We also need to say that if you don't pay your students, you're inevitably going to make it harder to ensure a diversity of students, and we'll hear a limited range of experiences because you're only going to have the students who have the privilege of being able to give their time for free, which leads us really nicely onto representation and diversity.
So when we reflected on the recruitment process and makeup of the board, members felt that diversity and representation were key components of our success. And whilst board members often share the experiences of their peers during meetings, they're primarily there to speak to their own experiences of being a mature student. And we know that this will be very different depending on who you speak to. They celebrated that we had recognised that mature students are not a homogenous group and that the staff they are collaborating with value their individual experiences. So how did we ensure representation and diversity? During our shortlisting for board members, as much as we were assessing the enthusiasm of the candidates to inspire change, we also wanted to maximise the diversity and representation, and we were transparent about this in our recruitment materials and our motivations behind doing so. We've listed the range of experiences and protected characteristics that we asked board members to speak to in their applications, and in doing so, we have a representative sample of the broader student population and hear a full range of lived experiences and opinions. This can mean that board members have very different perspectives, but we take the time to acknowledge that all their viewpoints are just as valid and create a safe space for people to disagree or share contrasting experiences. Student voice is most powerful when you create a space for voices that are not yet represented, and they appreciate a forum that represents them and their experiences.
Speaking on the theme of hierarchy and power dynamics, board members reflected that in previous student voice experiences, staff were very much felt to be the senior authority in the space, both in relation to the ratio of staff to students and around the relationship building between everyone. Students are used to being talked at by members of staff in the context of the lecture theatre. So in a space where you're asking them to be open and honest and vulnerable, the student needs to then feel like they're taking the lead and are in a space of trust and mutual respect. We discussed with the board members how, when creating a collaborative space between students and staff, it's really important to think about the relationship that students have with those staff in the room. For example, if it's someone who is usually marking their work, this might make them quite hesitant to share any feedback which could be seen as negative or potentially critical, and that it's going to take time to build that rapport and to recognise that the students are the experts in the room and that their feedback is really valued and welcomed. As staff members at MSAB, we are very much there to facilitate the space rather than take the lead. From decisions about when the meetings will take place to the agenda items and who the guest speakers are going to be, all those decisions are ultimately made by the students. What we really wanted to do was shift that hierarchy and make sure that students felt like they were at the top. But this dynamic does not automatically shift on its own. You have to do the work to make it happen, and for the students to recognise that they are the experts in the room, and that any staff involvement is there in the capacity to facilitate and to take action in response to the feedback that they are giving us. We see our role very much as creating the space to enable everyone to share their thoughts and opinions, and then to manage how best to take these forward into the institution to make change.
So we had some interesting discussions amongst board members about the formality versus the informality of the board. They felt the great thing about us being a formally recognised mechanism for student voice with the terms of reference and minuted meetings is that it legitimises the process and unifies and elevates mature student voices from across the institution. They felt recognised by the power in numbers and the visibility they had gained by being a part of the board, and felt it forced people to pay attention to them. But contrastingly, our members fed back that the informal nature of the board had been key to our success. We took the time to break down any barriers and build a rapport, getting to know each other as humans, not just as staff or students. In our induction, we spent a lot of time reflecting and sharing. What makes you you? Why do you care about this cause? And what was your journey here? We want to make sure we know one another and feel comfortable in the space together and show humility, patience and empathy at all times. And we felt it was important to highlight the transition to a space of sharing cannot happen by itself. Before we launch into agendas and meetings, we take the time at the start of every session to ask how everyone is, hear about their day, and start off with some informal conversation. Maybe someone's cat just walked across our laptop, or we have a debate about our favourite biscuits. Our informality has made our students feel comfortable to share their authentic selves, to make themselves vulnerable, to be open and honest with staff and each other, and it is this which makes it meaningful for everyone involved, and we have such rich and varied discussions in our meetings. We have also learnt to persevere and know that the way the board operates has developed and will continue to do so, but this whole process has been informed by the students, and we're not afraid to ask them if and how we could be doing things better, and I think they appreciate our humility in doing so.
A really lovely conversation emerged out of our workshop around sense of belonging and community. And as we said, the Mature Student Advisory Board has been a really powerful tool for creating change at the University of Leeds, and we will talk about some of those changes in a moment. But our members also expressed to us how helpful it has been as a mechanism for connecting like-minded students who might not have met otherwise. They shared how they felt a sense of community through the board meetings themselves, and that it's really helped enhance their sense of belonging, strengthening the bond between mature students who felt scattered within faculties across the university. So not only can collaboration in an advisory board style capacity have a positive impact as a result of the feedback given in those spaces, but in and of themselves, they can create really valuable spaces of belonging.
To ensure student voice feels meaningful and is at the core of your decision-making processes, the board felt it's important to consider what the next steps are going to be once you have created a space to capture the student voices, and what are you going to do with the ideas and feedback generated to create tangible outputs, where it's the institutional agency for change. So whilst it's great to set up a mechanism by which you can effectively capture student voice, it's only going to be meaningful if you can actually do something with that feedback. MSAB has become an important part of our service offer to mature students and directly feeds into the Lifelong Learning Centre Service Committee as a recurring agenda item for these meetings. This means that the feedback we gain is directly informing the work of the centre. We also have links to the Student Success Project here at Leeds, and one of the Student Success Project managers, whose area of focus is mature students, regularly participates in our meetings, and MSAB's work feeds into a network of faculty student success officers. As I said before, we don't want staff voice to dominate the meetings, but we have opened our meetings to guest members of staff seeking collaboration and feedback, and this has been very effective at working towards institutional change. It's effective because the staff seeking feedback attend voluntarily. They are not forced. There's a want to be there, a want to be in the space and to make change, and our board members value the institutional connections we have made with key stakeholders. And this is how we are starting to go about creating that cultural shift at the institution.
To ensure that student voice remains meaningful for everyone involved, it is super important to close the feedback loop and disseminate updates about what was spoken about and what we're doing next about it. All staff and students can hear about what has been discussed in our board meetings through the creation of our lovely infographic summaries, where we pull out all the key themes and the actions from our meetings. These are then shared in the Mature Student newsletter and across our social media platforms too. You can see what we're talking about here and follow the link to read these in your own time. The idea was actually developed through the board as well, who wanted a less formal and easily digestible way of keeping mature students informed. I'm sure we can all relate to saying we would like to see the minutes of something and then receiving 10 pages of writing and perhaps thinking that we don't have the time to read through all of that. We've learned that as well as making time for the meetings themselves, it does take a lot of time to summarise that feedback in a way that is meaningful and to circulate it across the institution. But it's certainly been time very well spent. And in our second year, we really want to consider how we can distribute the content of the meeting discussions even more broadly across the university and ensure that that message is getting out to key members of staff across the departments. The board have also expressed an interest to work with school reps across the institution this year, and that's an idea that we're currently taking forward. It's also paramount to share progress against action points with the board. They've given us the feedback, so they really should be kept up to date about what staff at the university are doing about it. So every meeting has a recurring agenda item to review our action log and update against those actions. This transparency has been particularly valued by our board members. We also recognise that it's important to manage expectations amongst the students involved. In an organisation as large as the University of Leeds, change can take time, and being really clear about this is key to maintaining the investment of the group. Thinking carefully about what it is we can change as a group now, and then also how they can be part of a bigger movement to make institutional change for future mature students.
So when we reflected with the board on some of our successes from our first year, we were overwhelmed with the impact the board has already had at the University of Leeds. Here we are at the LUU Partnership Awards, and it was great to share our success with some of our board members joining us for the awards evening. Here are some of the successes our board members wanted to share with you today, and I'll just elaborate on a couple. One of our board members is now part of the Leeds University Union Exec, and they are the first mature student and the first part-time student to hold such a position. They accredited the Mature Student Advisory Board in making them feel part of the student voice movement at Leeds, and it gave them the confidence to apply. Mature students are shaping the support offer from Skills at Library, an area of work which started after one of our board members, Bryony, raised this as an agenda item, and it's a great example of how a student brought an idea to the board and has generated it into tangible actions and change here at the university, and I'll let her speak more to this area of work in a moment. We have had senior leadership from the university engage in our board meetings. Student voice should be heard by staff from the top down, so we are so grateful that Deputy Vice-Chancellor Jeff Rabel joined us for one of our meetings last year, and if he's watching this presentation, he has an open invite for the future. And finally, we have secured Footsteps funding, generously donated by University of Leeds alumni, to establish some targeted activity for younger mature students to foster a sense of belonging and community. This bid for funding was informed by input and direction from the Mature Student Advisory Board, and this work will also be centred in co-creation between staff and students. I'm going to stop talking now and give the floor to some of our wonderful mature students. We are so proud of what they have accomplished and all that the board has achieved. We really think our success has been down to a truly authentic staff and student partnership, and we hope this has shown how student voice can be transformed into institutional change.
My name's Bryony. I'm a second year diagnostic radiography student, and this is my second degree. My first degree, I was 19, I just finished my A-levels, and I went to uni with bags of ambition and bags of naivety. The second time round, I've come to uni with a few more years under my belt, a few more pounds under my belt, and two small children who were 1 and 4 when I started my degree. So it's safe to say I've lost none of my ambition or none of my naivety from my first degree. And it was this change in circumstances that I had a very different experience coming to uni the second time round to my first time going to uni. And some of these I expected. I expected certain aspects to be very different being a mature student, such as my first week, one of my peers referred to me as an oldie on my course, which was very humbling, but it is something that I expected. But there were different challenges that I didn't expect coming to uni, and I didn't feel very supported in when I came to uni, as they just seemed to be affecting me as a mature student and not some of my peers. So when the advert for the Mature Student Advisory Board came out, I jumped at the chance because I thought, oh, here's an opportunity for me to explain some of the experiences and the difficulties I had and experienced when I came to uni as a mature student, and hopefully reduce some of those barriers and some of the difficulties for mature students by highlighting the issues to the uni. So some of the highlights have already been spoken about before, but one of my personal highlights working with the board has been working with the library team as well as the Lifelong Learning Centre to produce study resources that address needs that are more likely to affect mature students. So This started in a meeting that we had within the board, and we got lots of ideas and feedback from board members about study skills and study resources that just tend to affect mature students and aren't currently provided for by the current study skills resource that the uni gives out. And it's meant that the Mature Student Advisory Board has had an active role in creating change and creating these study resources with the library team, with the Lifelong Learning Centre, and it's created more visibility for mature students and more visibility about their needs and requirements and how to address this and the best way of addressing this. So that's been a really positive thing and a highlight for me that's come out of the board. But I've also gained lots of things personally from being part of the board, which I don't think I would have got the opportunity to just going through the university student as a system in the system. And that has been a sense of community. I've met other mature students from across the university and had an opportunity to talk with them, chat with them and discuss problems, and that's not something that I would have had the opportunity to do before. So that's been really wonderful. I also gained recognition, which I think institutions as in general are good at giving recognition. They're good at saying, oh, you've done well in this, well done. That's something that's universally quite well done, but it's not necessarily disseminated down and delivered across the board for all people who've contributed to that. And that's something the board does really well. It makes sure that all the members feel like they've been recognised when the board's been given an award or it's achieved something. Everyone feels like they've been part of that and they've been recognised in that achievement. And finally, acknowledgement, which sounds similar to recognition, but it is actually different. Acknowledgement for me has been acknowledging me as a parent and my circumstances and my individual needs. And that's been really important in addressing some of the barriers that I've faced being at uni and overcoming them, because I think acknowledgement for an individual and their individual needs and circumstances is sometimes all that someone needs to overcome certain barriers and achieve their full potential.
I'm Faith Castle, a second-year mature student on the Professional Studies BA programme at the University of Leeds. I joined MSAB as I wanted to give a voice to the mature student community, in particular representing fellow disabled students at Leeds. This board gives us the opportunity to leave a legacy for future students, hopefully shaping things for better. My personal areas of priority are inclusivity, belonging and increased accessibility on campus, and this is quite widely shared with board colleagues. MSAB is a great example of providing student voice with meaning, as the board and the wider mature student community are able to curate the agenda with items of importance to them. And the chairs, Lauren, Laura and Paul, assist in following things up and connecting us with other departments. And we found that just by being a board gives us legitimacy to our voice. So that means we're listened to across the institution and positively received as well. I'm sure Lauren and Laura have already mentioned we even won a partnership award this year. Another great achievement this year has been the conversations MSAB has had around menopause support for students. We've put forward ideas around creating a cafe for peer support, champions in student support teams, training staff on the experiences of students and considerations for arrangements around assessments for affected individuals. This shared success and seeing our ideas coming to life is really important for the board. We can see the items of importance progressing well and having feedback makes it all worthwhile. And not least having a community of fellow mature students who might not have otherwise met day to day in our campus visits really creates that sense of belonging and makes us feel part of it.
Thank you so much for watching and for listening to our presentation. Really hope that you have found this interesting and that it's popped some new exciting thoughts into your head. If you would like to connect with the Mature Student Advisory Board, we have popped the link there to our agenda submission form. So if you've got any ideas or topics that you think that we should be discussing at those meetings, we really would love to hear from you. Or if you'd just like to have a conversation or have any questions about what we've mentioned in this presentation, I'm really happy for you to drop me an email at l.r.huxley@leeds.ac.uk.
We've also popped a link to the Lifelong Learning Centre's Linktree, where you can find out more about our service offer to part-time, foundation year and mature students from across the university, and you can also email us at lifelonglearning@leeds.ac.uk. Thanks for watching, and do send this to any colleagues that you think might be interested. We'd love to spread the word far and wide. Thank you.